Okay, thank you and welcome everyone. Thanks for joining the special online program hosted by the Merowitz Center. My name is Laura Bryant, and a special shout out to the Covenant Place residents who are here joining us today. Our guide is Elana Kaplan, former St. Louisan museum educator and lecturer for the Met. Elana has been with us all summer. She led Public Parks and Private Gardens program first, then American Art with an online tour of the American wing at the Met. And today we wrap things up with this three-part series with a breathtaking overview of Van Gogh's Cypresses. So please help me welcome back Elana Kaplan, and we're always very happy to see you.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. It's so great to be back with everybody with this wonderful Van Gogh Cypress exhibit. So I'm just going to do my screen share and then we will get started. Okay, great. So we've traveled to the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where this exhibit, Van Gogh's Cypresses, was actually an exhibit last summer between May and August of 2023. But a number of the works of art are actually at the Met or at other museums in New York. So you're still able to see them. They're just not all together anymore. I just want to give a little bit of a background to the exhibit from last summer, and then we'll talk about Van Gogh a little and then start looking at the art. So this exhibit was the first exhibit to focus solely on Van Gogh's cypress trees. And these trees are among the most famous in the history of art. They've been immortalized in the images by Vincent van Gogh. And a lot of the paintings are very iconic, like the one on the left. This was the ad that was advertising the exhibit all summer on buses, on billboards all over New York. So on the right, we have Van Gogh's iconic wheat field with cypresses, which is at the Met, permanently at the Met. On the left is Starry Night, which is at MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art. So both of these signature paintings are in the New York area. And these paintings were really the centerpiece in an exhibit that gave a new perspective on this motif of cypresses, which is really much synonymous with Van Gogh's showing his power of expression. It wasn't a large exhibit, and we'll do a little bit of a video just so you can see it. There were about 40 works of art in the exhibit, all about these cypresses, which are flame-like evergreen trees. And he shows how they successfully sparked, fueled, and stoked Van Gogh's imagination over the course of 2 years in the south of France. So he made all of his cypress trees over the course of 2 years, from his initial sighting of them in Arles to spending a lot of time painting them when he was at an asylum in Saint-Rémy. So besides paintings in this exhibit that we're going to see, besides these landmark paintings, there are also drawings and also illustrated letters. And the letters are really amazing. These letters are very rare, and they're really never lent or exhibited together because of the fragility of these letters. So it was really amazing to have all these things together in the exhibit around this theme of cypresses. And as I said, there were about 40 works of art in the exhibit, but it was 24 paintings and 15 drawings and 4 letters with the sketches. Okay, so we're gonna start off with this is a picture of me at the entrance to the exhibit, just to give you an idea of what it looked like. But we're gonna start off actually with a little bit of a video showing you what the exhibit looked like, the space. The curator will speak. It's a 25-minute video. We're just going to watch the first 2 minutes. And I just want everyone to be able to a little bit see the space that the paintings were in, what the exhibit looked like, and hear a little bit of what the curator has to say. And then we'll start looking at the paintings together.
Vincent van Gogh had an uncanny knack for getting to the root of the matter, folding his initial thought on cypresses into a letter of April 1888 from the south of France. The Dutch artist sized up the potential he foresaw, and famously realized, of picturing the region's distinctive evergreens under star-strewn night skies above golden fields of wheat. Yet it was not until more than a year later, after he left the Provençal town of Arles to take refuge at the nearby asylum of Saint-Rémy, that this spark of inspiration gave rise to his iconic pictures of the flame-like trees. those epic works take their place in a presentation that fills in the backstory of his invention for the first time. Following the arc of Van Gogh's progressive exploration of the towering evergreens as they gained ground in his artistic thinking over the course of his 2-year sojourn in Provence, this thematic survey retraces his long-standing preoccupation with a motif that he found captivating and challenging in equal measure. To an extent that has gone unrecognized, Van Gogh brought his trademark ambition, determination, and a great degree of consideration and reconsideration to giving inimitable form to the cypresses in images that are as commanding, robust, and enduring as the centuries-old evergreens. They did not spring to life in a fit of fervid inspiration or emotive outpourings of paint. Astonished that no one has yet done them as I see them, he prevailed to give signature form to the cypresses in works as striking for their originality as for their continuity of vision. From his first inspired response to the trees in his only dated drawing from Arles, to his last try at satisfying his ambition in a studio composition painted just before he left the asylum in May 1890.
Okay, so the video hopefully gave everyone an idea of what the exhibit looked like, how the paintings were organized, and a glimpse at some of the paintings that we're going to look at together much more in detail. Okay, so before we start looking at the famous cypress trees, I want to talk a little bit about the artist Vincent van Gogh, because I think all artists' biography really inform about their painting and why they painting things and how they painted. But even more so with Vincent van Gogh because of his turbulent life. So many of us are very familiar with Vincent van Gogh and the stories of his life. So I'm just going to briefly go through his biography as we're looking at this self-portrait that Van Gogh did. And I'll briefly just go through his biography to get a better understanding of Van Gogh, the person, and Van Gogh, the artist. And this is a self-portrait that he did in 1887. So Vincent van Gogh didn't start painting until he was in his late 20s. He was born in 1853 in the Netherlands, and he died in 1890. He was only 37 years old when he died. So as we look at his painting and talk about how many paintings he made, it was a very short span of time that he was painting for less than 10 years. Van Gogh's father was a clergyman, and Van Gogh had 5 siblings. Many of us are familiar with his younger brother, Theo, who would be his close friend and financial supporter throughout his life. Van Gogh loved to draw from a young age, and he was quite talented. But as is the story with many artists, his parents did not want him to be an artist. So he worked as an art dealer, a teacher. He worked as an assistant in a bookshop. And finally, he worked as a preacher, helping poor people. When he was a poor preacher, he sold his sketches to earn a little money for food and lodging. And then when he was 27 years old, he enrolled in the Brussels Art Academy, where he was supported by a wealthy painter who recognized his talent. After art school, his brother Theo sent him money, which he used to pay for models and for art materials because he never had enough money for those things. He lived a subsistence lifestyle his whole life, eating only bread and coffee, which led him to be quite ill quite often. When Van Gogh started painting, he was determined to help the poor peasants that he had worked with when he was a preacher. And so his beginning paintings looked something like this. They were very dark and a little bit sad paintings, using earthy tones because he was trying to promote and help the poor peasants that he worked with. He realized that people were not buying these paintings because they were very sad, dark paintings. So in 1886, Van Gogh moved to Paris, where his brother Theo was a successful art dealer. The French capital at that time was the center of the art world and home to an inspiring new art movement, which was Impressionism. Through Theo, Van Gogh met the leading Impressionist artists at the time, including Monet, Pissarro, Renoir, and Gauguin. Van Gogh was amazed by the bright colors and the freshness of Impressionist paintings. So under their influence, his art underwent a dramatic change. Van Gogh abandoned these dark colors of his first paintings and his chosen subject of poor working people, and instead he began to paint bright, colorful urban landscapes and still life paintings, still lifes of flowers, similar to the Impressionists. Okay, so this is a still life he did this is a self-portrait he did during that time in 1887. And this painting was actually painted on the back of this painting. It's a 2-sided painting in the Met. Both of these paintings are at the Met. It's two-sided because Van Gogh was always short on funds. So he sometimes didn't have enough money to buy canvases, so he would paint paintings on the backs of other paintings. And he would often make self-portraits so that he didn't have to pay a model, and he could just, use himself as a model. Van Gogh produced more than 20 self-portraits at this time between 1886 and 1888, and at least 43 self-portraits during his lifetime. He was always short on funds, but he was determined nevertheless to hone his skills as a figure painter, so he became his own best model. He said, this is a quote for him, quote, "I purposely bought a good enough mirror to work for myself for want of a model." By the autumn of 1887, Van Gogh, at age 34, when he did this portrait, he was becoming tired of the hectic pace of life in Paris. At that time, he had painted over 200 paintings in 2 years. But too many late nights and too much coffee and alcohol were making him ill and irritable. Even his brother Theo found him difficult to live with. Van Gogh decided to move to southern France, to Arles, in hopes of restoring his health and peace of mind. It was only in Arles, in Provence, the south of France, that Vincent van Gogh found his personal style. Previously in Paris, he had pretty much been painting like the Impressionists. He appropriated their style and implemented it in his own fashion. But then the impressions of the French capital and the hustle and bustle of urban life and the conversation with fellow artists, he found it too strenuous. So he decided to go to the south of France in search of peace and quiet, new inspiration, and new light. The time in Arles became one of Van Gogh's most prolific periods. He completed 200 paintings and more than 100 drawings and watercolors during this time, and that's when he did his first cypress painting. He was enchanted by the local countryside and light in Arles. His works from this period are rich in yellow and mauve and ultramarine. They include harvests, wheat fields, and general rural landscapes from the area. And it is in Arles where he started painting his famous cypress trees. So we're going to look at his first painting that included cypress trees. You can see them off in the corner here. And as we're talking about the paintings, notice his progression with cypress trees, how he paints them, where he places them in the painting, how large they are. So here in his first painting of cypresses, they're kind of off to the left side. They're small, maybe not the most important feature in this painting. But he already was recognizing that cypress trees were very eye-catching, and they were a storied fixture of the countryside where Van Gogh was living. And they immediately struck a chord with Van Gogh. The robust, long-living evergreens had presided over the region for millennia, standing guard in the revered role as protectors of this landscape, which was impacted by the notorious fierce northerly mistral winds. So they had, in the south of France, in this area he was living in, there were these strong, cold northwesterly wind that blew from southern France into the Gulf of Lion in the northern Mediterranean. So these cypress trees were kind of standing guard and protecting the landscape from those winds. Few motifs were more emblematic of the south of France or resonated more strongly with Van Gogh's profound appreciation for the enduring and consoling aspects of nature. So from the time that Van Gogh stepped foot in Arles, he hoped that other artists would join him in this area, which his friend Paul Gauguin did for a little bit that fall. But he really loved the nature in this area and wanted other artists to join him there. And so Van Gogh began including cypresses in his landscapes painted on the outskirts of Arles in 1888. And they became much more prominent after he moved to the asylum outside Saint-Rémy the following year. Through a number of paintings, drawings, and letters, we will learn why Van Gogh was so fascinated with cypress trees. Okay, so here we have one of those letters that I referred to before. There are 4 letters that were in this exhibit. These letters are rarely ever shown for conservation purposes. They can't really be exposed to too much light or the environment. So they're rarely shown. So it was really such a treat to have these letters in the exhibit. So here we see it's an illustrated letter that Van Gogh wrote to Emile Bernard, another artist. He wrote it on March 18th, 1888. It's pen and ink on paper, and this is owned by the Morgan Library and Museum in New York. I will try and tell you where each work of art is from, because the works of art are from museums all over the world. The dimensions of this letter are 8 by 5 1/4 inches. Now, the Morgan Library, by the way, has 19 of 22 surviving letters that Van Gogh wrote to Emile Bernard between 1887 and 1889. And I love these letters because they're not just letters, right? You see the writing, but look at the sketches. He would write a letter and always have a sketch. And you might see in the sketch the drawbridge with the walking couple over here. So notice the drawbridge, because this is a sketch that he used for the painting that we were just looking at, this drawbridge over here. So it's amazingly detailed drawing. I love, seeing the process and Van Gogh's letters and drawings and sketches and paintings. And this letter is to his friend. You can see it's written in French for any of you who read French, but you can read the beginning, Mon cher Bernard. He's writing to his friend Bernard. And it's really talking about the beauty of the countryside where he's living in Arles, the beauty of it, the colors, and, hoping that friends of his, other artists, will join him here to paint. The amazing thing about today and the internet and everything is you can search the letter and get a complete translation of each of these letters that he has written. Okay, so that's a sketch, and now we'll take a few minutes to look at this painting. So the painting is called Drawbridge. It was painted in May 1888. It's oil on canvas, and the size is 19.5 by 25.25 inches. And this was loaned by a museum in Cologne. Okay, so this was a painting of a canal that was not far from Arles, where Van Gogh spent time, and he found a motif that reminded him of his Dutch homeland. Of course, Van Gogh was born in the Netherlands, and a drawbridge is a motif that he saw often in his Dutch homeland. And Van Gogh ended up capturing the drawbridge on canvas. He made 5 paintings that included drawbridge. This may seem astonishing to us, but Van Gogh was actually not the spontaneous painter that many people think he was. He was not a spontaneous painter. He often very much planned out his paintings. So for this painting, the drawbridge, he went about it almost like an old master. We know from letters that he wrote to his brother Theo that he constructed what was called a perspective frame. And he did that to create precise lines and angles when portraying perspective. This device, a perspective frame, was used for outdoor sightings to compare the proportion of items that were near to those that were far away. Using guidelines made of strings, he made the correct reproduction of the bridge easier for himself. So he would almost reproduce the bridge with strings. Modern technology of the painting even reveals that there are pencil lines under the paint of this composition, which shows that he really did, plan out this painting. It wasn't spontaneous. Now, Van Gogh, like many of the Impressionists, was very much influenced by Japanese woodcut prints, as evidenced by his simplified use of color to create a harmonious and unified image. So look at the colors in the painting. You'll notice contrasting colors, such as blue and yellow, and they were used to bring vibrancy to the works. And we'll see that in a number of his paintings. He puts blue next to yellow for contrast. He painted also with a very specific style using impasto, which is thickly applied paint, and he used color to depict the reflection of light. So this subject matter that we're looking at, a drawbridge on a canal, reminded Van Gogh of his homeland in the Netherlands. He asked his brother Theo to frame the painting and send it to an art dealer in the Netherlands, hoping that he would sell it. By the way, Van Gogh only sold 1 painting throughout his life. That's it. So this painting did not sell. Van Gogh was 35 when he made this painting and the drawings, the 5 paintings and drawings of this bridge. He was living in Arles in southern France. He was at the height of his career. This is when he was producing some of his best-known works of art, the sunflowers, the fields, farmhouses, and the people of Arles. It was a very prolific time for Van Gogh. In less than 15 months, he made 100 drawings, produced more than 200 paintings, and wrote more than 200 letters. And you saw that his letters weren't just letters. They were, sketches in themselves. But the canals, drawbridges, windmills, and thatched cottages, and the expansive fields of the Arles countryside reminded Van Gogh of his life in the Netherlands, which he had nostalgia for. Arles brought him the solace and bright sun that he sought for himself, and conditions to explore painting with more vivid colors, intense color contrast, and varied brushstroke. He also returned to the roots of his artistic training from the Netherlands, mostly by using, which we'll see soon, using a reed pen in some of his sketches. So as I was talking about the brightness of the colors and living in the countryside, notice the difference between the colors in this painting and this painting, that these dark paintings that he started with the earthy colors, and notice how his palette has really very much changed. Okay, so now we're looking at one of his drawings of the painting we just looked at. And again, I love in this exhibit that there were paintings and drawings, sketches and letters. So we really see Van Gogh's process and how he drew and how he painted, which is amazing. So this drawing of the bridge was done in July 1888. This is actually done after this painting. So it's a drawing done, some drawings he did before, some he did after. And this was done with this reed pen. and logwood ink over graphite on woven paper. The size of it is 9 5/8 inches by 12 5/8 inches. And this was loaned to the exhibit by the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, LACMA. Okay, so as I said, it's just incredible to look at this drawing, see how he made his lines, his brush strokes. You can see his, the cypress trees off on the left side, and even the detail of the woman walking across the bridge, which we see in this painting also. Now, for this drawing, I had said that Van Gogh used a reed pen. And Van Gogh used reed pens that he actually made for himself. He would find reeds along the canal, as you can see over here. We'd find reeds over here along the canals in the city. And I'll show you what a reed pen looks like. This is actually a picture from the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. And it has some of Van Gogh's reed pens and also his sketchbook, which is amazing. So you get an idea of what it meant, what a reed pen looks like, and what it meant to use one. And reed pens create an aesthetically pleasing result. But as you can imagine, by looking at them, they're not very easy to draw with. And that's why Van Gogh practiced a great deal using these reed pens. Okay, so now you can see side by side. On the right side, the reed pen drawing of this drawbridge, and on the left side, the painting that he did. And again, you get an idea of his style, of his brushstroke, of his lines, and we can see that Van Gogh's depiction of this bridge has been considered, as I said before, an exercise in nostalgia, because he was remembering the drawbridges in his hometown in the Netherlands. So it was really an exercise in nostalgia. So as I said, this was done these paintings of the drawbridge were done in Arles. And then in October 1888, Gauguin joined Van Gogh in Arles. And that was his dream, that artists would join him. And Gauguin lived with him at the Yellow House, which is a famous painting where Van Gogh was renting this house. Gauguin stayed with him for about 2 months. The two friends lived together. They shared costs. They drank a lot of absinthe, and they also painted the same subjects. But soon after, after about a month of living together, there was a lot of tension between Gauguin and Van Gogh, which is quite well known. And that is what many people say led Van Gogh to cut off his ear in December of 1888. And after that, after he cut off his ear, he went to an asylum. It was called an asylum at that time, a mental hospital. He spent a year, and the hospital was in a place called Saint-Remy, and he was there from May 1889 to May 1890. And that is where Van Gogh produced most of his very famous cypress tree paintings. Now, when he was at Saint-Remy, at the hospital, he had a lot of independence. He had a studio there. He was allowed to go outside and paint. So he really had a lot of freedom and independence to create some of his most famous paintings. And here's the first one that we'll look at together. This is Cypresses. It's called Cypresses. It was painted in 1889. And the size of it is 36 3/4 inches by 29 1/8 inch. And this is owned by the Met, and it is always on display if you come to the galleries. So just a little bit of a background of the time period. Beginning in February 1889, Van Gogh suffered from more mental health challenges. So in May of 1889, he voluntarily went to a mental hospital in Saint-Remy, where he stayed for a year. During this time period, he created many of his most famous paintings, including this one and Starry Night, which is at the Museum of Modern Art in New York, which we'll look at today also. He felt that painting helped soothe and heal his spirit, but he continued to drive himself too hard. He completed more than 100 paintings and 100 drawings while he was staying at Saint-Remy. This painting, Cypresses, was painted outdoors in late June 1889, shortly after Van Gogh began his year-long stay at the asylum in Saint-Remy. The terrain around Saint-Remy was more rugged than the flat plains of Arles that he was used to, and Van Gogh was particularly drawn to the tough cypress trees that were in abundance there. The subject, which he found, and this is a quote, and I think it said it in the video that we watched, quote, he found cypresses beautiful as regards lines and proportions, like an Egyptian obelisk. The cypresses both captivated and challenged the artist. He did not give up on his quest to paint them accurately. And in painting them, he was finally able to express the strong emotion that gripped him in front of nature. So he experienced a lot of very strong emotion in front of nature. He wanted to put that emotion on canvas, and he felt like he was able to do that with the cypress trees. So if you look carefully at the cypress trees, first of all, notice the painting. Compared to the last painting where the cypress trees were off in the distance, very small, look, they're taking up most of the painting. They're off to the left, but it's really taking up most of the painting. It's much larger. We can see the details, and you can see that a cypress tree has many small, dark evergreen needles, and they grow very close together. So in this painting, the trees are tinged with a yellowish green that you can see, and it has a lavender and blue limbs which show through the blanket of needles. And look at all the shades of green that Van Gogh uses in the cypress tree. Many, many dark greens, light greens, yellow greens, lots of different shades of green to create his cypress. Van Gogh applied the painting with curving and spiraling brushstrokes, and that was really his signature style. When you see a Van Gogh, you notice the very curvy, spiraling brushstrokes, and it gives a feeling that nature is moving. It gives a feeling that the tree's growing, that the clouds are moving. The spiraling circle brushstrokes are very much full of energy and full of life. Also, the luscious strokes of color are very thick, so that if you look at the real paintings, there are ridges and valleys everywhere on the surface of the canvas. And I will show you some details so you too can see the ridges and valleys. But as you're looking at the painting, notice the thick, curvy brushstrokes. And again, it gives the painting a sense of movement. And this thickly applied paint forms a landscape of its own when it's viewed very close up. This painting was the Metropolitan Museums of Art first Van Gogh painting. It was acquired in 1949. And what's amazing about this painting, I have seen this painting hundreds of times. I've spent many years studying the painting. I use it on tours, I use it in lectures. But when I went to this exhibit and did research on this exhibit and the paintings in it, I learned a very interesting discovery about this painting through the exhibit. By the way, which goes to show there's always more to learn about art, and you can look at the same painting hundreds and hundreds of times and discover new things. So I'm going to show you this discovery that I learned through this exhibit through a close-up. This is a close-up of the cypress painting we were just looking at. So first of all, you can see the thick paint. You can see the texture. And you can see the impasto style, which is using very thick paint. By the way, most artists at this time would water down their oil paints with turpentine. Van Gogh didn't. He used them straight from the tube, and that's why they have such thick texture and such thick paintings. And that's also probably why he could never afford, because he went through so much paint because he didn't water it down. Now we're looking at a close-up, and I don't know if any of you noticed as I was chatting that there's actually a rock here. This is all paint, and it's thick paint, but this is a little rock, and there are little pebbles in this paint that you might be able to see. So it seems that while Van Gogh was working on this painting outdoors, he painted this outdoors, it must have toppled off of his easel onto the ground and gotten little pebbles in it. So the conservator for this painting, and also a scientist, as they were conserving and looking at this painting, they found scores of sand particles, small limestone pebbles, and the largest pebble they found, which is right here, is 6 millimeters in diameter. It looks much bigger because I blew it up, but they also found within the paint vegetal matter. So this confirms for us, first of all, that the painting was indeed painted outdoors. And it also tells us that it's amazing that Van Gogh was painting a painting of nature. He was painting in nature because he was outdoors. And the paintings even have nature within the paintings, these pieces of pebbles and sand, which is just, to me, unbelievable. So you can see in this close-up the thick impasto paint. You can see the indents, you can see the sand and pebbles, which must have been embedded when the painting fell to the ground. And this might have happened when one of those strong minstrel winds that I was talking about, when they blew through. And we'll actually see one of the winds that he painted in his famous Starry Night painting. Now, Van Gogh later did paint over some of the debris. Probably he did that when he was back in his studio, but a lot of the debris he left because for him, painting a scene of nature in nature and having nature in the painting was just remarkable. Okay, so let's look at this drawing that he made of this painting. So now we're looking at a drawing that he also made in June 1889. This is ink and graphite, and the size of it is 24 by 18 inches, and this one is at the Brooklyn Museum. And again, I love looking at these drawings. You can see Van Gogh's, even when he's drawing, he's not even painting here. Even when he's drawing, he's got the movement, the curvy lines, the short curvy lines, the lines in the sky, the clouds, the feeling of movement that this, cypress tree is growing. And notice how he crops the cypress tree at the top, so it has a feeling that it's growing off of the canvas. It's still growing. So again, the movement, the energy, the way he makes you almost feel like the clouds are moving, the tree is blowing. It's just incredible. And that's his signature style. And now we can see the drawing and the painting next to each other. And again, seeing his style, the way, imagining how he drew, how he painted these paintings is quite incredible. And then our next thing we have here is another one of his letters. And again, his letters are illustrated. I love it. You can see the little illustration, the little drawing of the painting we were just looking at, right? The cypress trees with the moon, the daytime moon in it. And this is an illustrated letter that he wrote to his brother, Theo van Gogh. He wrote it June 25th, 1889. It's pen and ink on paper. This letter is on loan from the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and it's 8 1/4 inches by 10 inches. And again, these letters are very, very fragile. Conservators do not want them shown for long periods or loaned out. So the fact that they were at this exhibit was really quite incredible. Now, this letter is very long. I'm just going to read you excerpts from it just to get an idea of what Van Gogh was writing to his brother Theo. This is, remember, while he was at Saint Remy, where he's at the mental health hospital, and what he's writing to his brother about. So the letter, and again, I'm just going to read excerpts because it's very long. He says, "My dear Theo, enclosed you'll find an order for colors to replace the one in my previous letter." Okay, so he's right away asking his brother, please send me paint. Please send me colors so I can paint more. He relied on his brother to send him materials. Then he says, we've had some fine hot days and I've got some more canvases on the go so that there are 12 number 30 canvases on the stocks. 2 studies of cypresses of that difficult shade of bottle green. So he's explaining what he's working on. He's working on his cypress paintings and what color he needs. I've worked their foregrounds with thick impastos of white lead, which gives firmness to the ground. So he's describing his process. But whatever the case, outside Paris, one quickly forgets Paris by throwing oneself into the heart of the country. One changes one's ideas. As for me, my health is still very good and work is distracting me. And as for me, I don't know what to wish for. First of all, working here and elsewhere, it appears to me more or less the same thing. And since I'm here, staying here, the most simple. Only there's a lack of news to write to you, for the days are all the same. As for ideas, I've no others except to think that a wheat field or cypress are well worth the effort at looking at them from close at hand. And then we're going to skip a little. He says, I have a wheat field, very yellow and very bright, perhaps the brightest canvas I've ever done. And he's referring to this one, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The cypresses still preoccupy me. I'd like to do something with them like the canvases of the sunflowers, because it astonishes me that no one has done them as I see them. It's beautiful as regards lines and proportions like an Egyptian obelisk, and the green has such a distinguished quality. To do nature here, as everywhere, one must really be here for a long time. Naturally, it will please me if you send me the colors soon if it's possible, but above all, do what you can without exhausting yourself too much. So again, he's asking for the colors. And if you prefer to send me it in batches, that's okay too, however you can send it. Then he talks a little bit about books that his sisters has sent him, and he talks about those books a little. And then he goes on to say about the cypresses he's working on. I think that of the 2 canvases of cypresses, the one I'm making will be the best. And he's talking about this one over here, which we'll get to next. The trees in it are very tall and massive. The foreground very low, brambles and undergrowth. Behind it, violet hills and a very special sky, lots of colors. And that's why I need you to please send more colors. I'll send you drawings of them with the other 2 drawings that I've also done. That will keep me busy for the next few days. Finding something to do all day is a big thing here. What a pity that one can't move the building here. It would be magnificent to hold an exhibition here, all the empty rooms, the big corridors. I'd very much like to see the Rembrandt painting you spoke about in your last letter. So he and Theo often talked about paintings. And then he ends by saying, is your health good? Handshake to you and your wife. I hope to send you new drawings next week. Ever yours, Vincent. So he was continuously writing his brother, sending sketches, keeping his brother informed of what he was working on, and always asking him for more colors and more paint. And with that background, we'll look at our next very famous painting, Wheatfield with Cypresses. This one is also at the Met. It was painted in June 1889, and it's 28 by 7/8 inches by 36 3/4 inches. So this is another painting where the cypresses are prominent, but notice where, the cypresses are different. They're placed differently depending on the painting. Our last painting that we looked at, and we'll just go back for a minute, was a vertical view of cypresses. And this one is a horizontal composition. Also, the last painting, they were very large and took up most of the canvas. Here, they're off to the side and don't take up most of the canvas. This was painted outside. Also, it was painted outside in the countryside, just beyond the asylum walls in June 1889. The fact that it was painted outdoors also was confirmed by the discovery of a wheat husk and tiny pieces of gravel in the paint. Van Gogh regarded the painting as a study to capture the motif. It has an immediacy to it. Again, as you're looking at this painting, look at the thick, curvy brushstrokes, the movement, the energy, the emotion, the study of color. Notice how he splits it up into 3 bands of color. The background is a band of color, a horizontal band of color, which is different shades of blue. The middle ground is a horizontal band of color, shades of different shades of green. And the foreground is a band of different shades of yellow. So he has these 3 bands of color and various shades of yellow, green, and blue, all emblematic of Van Gogh's distinct art style. In this painting, we can really focus on his unique painting style. Again, the curvy lines, the textured surface, the thick paint. Now, a little bit about the purchase of this painting. It was bought in 1951 by a Swiss arms dealer. His son sold it to the Met in 1993, but he sold it to the Met with a provision, and he said the painting can never leave the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So since 1993, this painting has not left, and that's why the exhibit was really built around this painting, because it cannot leave. Now, I want to look at a couple of close-ups of this painting. Here's a close-up. This is a detail from the center of the canvas, and it's showing, again, the brushstrokes, Van Gogh's thick, curvy brushstrokes. Look at the thick, thick paint he used. Again, he didn't water down his oil paint. So you see this impasto, you see the thickness and the texture. It's as if you could touch it and really feel the grooves and the ridges in this painting. And it has these impasto, the areas of thick paint and texture. Again, Van Gogh created this impasto by using thick oil paint. It wasn't watered down. He also Van Gogh didn't paint with a paintbrush. Sometimes he painted with a palette knife. So he would, take the paint, put it on the canvas, and then use a palette knife. So let's see where this detail comes from. So here's our painting. Here's the close-up, and the close-up comes from right here, right in the middle of the painting. So again, you get an idea of the texture, the thickness, the brushstroke. And then we have another detail to see the thick paint. This is from the right foreground, and it shows, again, Van Gogh's varied brushwork. You can see curvy lines, swirly brushstrokes, different, straight lines, thick lines, thin lines, curvy lines, really his varied brushstroke. And then our next image is actually an X-radiograph of the painting. And this is very important because it reveals Van Gogh's technique. The movement, the energy, the brushstroke is just quite incredible. So after seeing all those close-ups and seeing his process, let's take one more look at this amazing masterpiece that cannot ever leave the Metropolitan Museum of Art, but is always on view. So if you visit, you will be able to see it. It often has crowds of people around it. So take a look at this one. And then I want to show you a drawing for this painting. This is the Wheatfield and Cypresses drawing. It was done between June and July 1889. It's 18 inches by 24.5 inches. And this was done using pencil, reed pen, which we've seen, pen and ink. And it's on paper. And this is at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. So basically, Van Gogh would rely on a pencil underdrawing. And he took this drawing. This drawing was actually done before the painting. So he took this drawing and then did the painting. And he transformed his drawing into a rich graphic vocabulary with robust yet graceful lines for the trees, the animated clouds. But look at, I love looking at the drawing because you can really see the lines, the long strokes, and look at in the sky, he has dots among the lines for the clouds. So again, you can see his process. You can see in this drawing, you can see both the lines, the dots, the curvy lines, the short, thick lines, all placed together, the mountain range, all the details. And despite the fading of certain passages, you might notice the sky, some of the pen and the ink and the reed pen have faded. And that is, of course, because Van Gogh used light-sensitive inks, which affected all his drawings. And so light-sensitive inks have now been exposed to light, so they're fading. And that's why we can't show them that often. But this reed pen rendition really shows us how he was very faithful to his concept of painting the cypress trees. Okay, so now we're going to look at a very similar cypress tree painting. It's not the same, but it's very similar. This is also a wheat field with cypresses. This one was done in September 1889. So the last one was June. This one is September. This one is owned by the National Gallery in London. So the previous wheat field painting that we were looking at from the Met is an exuberant study from nature. That one was painted outdoors. As we said, this one was painted outdoors and plein air. And you might be able to see the thicker paint. You might be able to see there's a little bit more movement, more energy, more emotion. It was painted outdoors. But this one was painted indoors. This was made in the quiet of his studio in the asylum in September 1889. He was recovering from an attack of an illness. He couldn't go outside, so he made this painting in his studio. Now, this work you might have noticed is more stylized and decorative. I'm not able to show them side by side because they're too large to fit on the canvas. I tried doing it, but then I was smushing them and it didn't look right. But what you should know about these paintings, which is interesting, is they're shown together in the Met exhibit, and it's the first time that they've been seen together since 1901, for over 100 years. In 1901, they were on sale at a Paris dealer and they were showed side by side. And in this exhibit, over 100 years later, they're shown side by side again. Now, you might notice as you're looking at the painting that it's painted more thinly, it's more evenly applied. The colors are brighter, but again, it doesn't have the same energy as the last painting, perhaps because it was painted outdoors and Van Gogh wasn't within nature when he was making it, perhaps because it was after he was recovering from an illness. But again, as you look at it and take a minute, just to look at it and notice the differences between this painting and this painting. Okay, so now the painting that we're looking at now, as I said, it's in the National Gallery in London. In 1923, it was bought for the Tate Gallery for £3,300. And that was representing that was the first Van Gogh in a UK public collection in 1923. And then in 1961, it was transferred to the National Gallery where it is today. Okay, so now it's time for a very famous Van Gogh painting, which is called Starry Night. It was painted in 1889. It's 29 inches by 36 1/4 inches. And Starry Night is arguably one of Van Gogh's most well-known paintings of all of his paintings. And it's probably the greatest work of art at the Museum of Modern Art. And I can't tell you how many times people come over to me when I'm at the Met and ask me, where is Starry Night? And I have to explain to them, it's not at the Met, it's at MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, which is not far from here, but it's not here. But we do have a lot of very famous paintings at the Met too. But everyone's looking to see Starry Night. So this one was actually painted when Van Gogh, again, was at Saint Remy. It has not been lent. This is a fun fact. It hasn't been lent to an exhibition since 2007. Okay, so it's the first time this has been lent to an exhibition since 2007. So it was quite a feat. And also, when you went to this exhibit at the Met, there was always a line in front of Starry Night. So I tried to go early before the museum was open or later after it closed to get a good look, because otherwise there were always lines in front of it. Now, as we've been talking about, Van Gogh liked to have his subject right in front of him when he was painting or drawing. So he either painted in nature or at least at a window so he could see nature. And it was no different for this painting. Even when he was confined to his room in the hospital at Saint Remy, he painted what he could see out of the window. And you'll notice this is a nighttime painting, which is rare among the Cypress painting. And just, again, look at the energy of this painting, the movement, the life you see. The painting really comes alive. You can see that there are 11 magnificent stars in the sky. You can count them. There are 11 stars. Each one is circled by silvery paint. And then you'll see going through this painting right here is a nebula, which is an interstellar cloud of dust, hydrogen, helium, and other gases. And it's just swirling right through the painting in the middle. The brightest member of the firmament, of course, is the sun, which we can see over here, which is eclipsed by an orange moon within the sun. Then we can see the ribbon of mountains, which shelters fields and a small town. And then, of course, we have two cypress trees painted with brown outline, and they rise up, and they're rising up on the left. And look at them. Their tendrils are corkscrewing up into the highest star. So again, Van Gogh made these cypress trees seem like they were larger than life, constantly growing. These cypress trees reach the stars in this painting. So again, his focus and his interest in cypress trees. But notice how different he painted this cypress trees than some of the other ones we're looking at. It has browns in it and darker greens. And that the tendrils are kind of corkscrewing. So the cypresses, the fact that they rise up to the firmament, they create a powerful visual link between the heaven and the earth in this painting. Now, as Van Gogh painted this painting, the sky was really the most important part in his mind. He might have been thinking about and recalling the story of Joseph. We know this big biblical story of Joseph, who had a dream about 11 stars and the sun and the moon bowing down to him. Now, of course, that was a story that Van Gogh knew very well because he worked as a preacher for many years. So perhaps he was thinking about this story because there are 11 stars in this painting, and there's also a sun and a moon. Now, if you look at the village, you might notice that it's typically Dutch. So again, his nostalgia for where he grew up, it's really based on a Dutch village. And there's even a very tall church spire here, which reaches all the way to the sky. But even though the village is typically Dutch, the landscape is the one that was familiar to him around St. Remy, where he was staying. Like the trees, the spire of this church also reaches for the heavens. So it's the connection between heaven and earth in this painting. And another very interesting fun fact about this painting is that apparently the painting accurately shows the constellation and the planets that shone in the night sky in June 1889. So the month that Van Gogh was making this painting, this was the constellation and the planets. This is how they looked, which is quite incredible. He was so in tune with nature that he was painting the exact constellation. This is a picture of me in front of the painting at the exhibit. And again, this is probably when I went very early in the morning, because otherwise there were always crowds around this painting. Okay, and our next painting is, it's called Country Road in Provence by Night. And this will be the last painting that we're looking at together. This was painted in May 1890. So Van Gogh brought his work in Provence to a close and full circle with his pivotal summary picture. And this painting actually marks his last try at realizing his long-standing vision of a cypress tree and a star. So you can see the cypress tree and the star. And this time he painted it much to his satisfaction. And it was kind of a triumphal last painting of the cypresses that he did. He wasn't as satisfied with some of the other ones that we looked at, but this one was his triumph. We can see the very tall, the very straight, and the very dark cypress tree paired with a crescent moon, which preside over this nocturnal scene. Again, it's another nocturnal painting of the cypresses, like Starry Night. And it draws upon such familiar elements as the hallowed stars, also this thatch roof cottage that we see back here, which we also saw on Starry Night. It also has this wheat field that we're looking at in the middle ground, which we saw in some of the other paintings. And there's actually also a hint to Gauguin's aspiration. He still hoped that one day he would work side by side with Van Gogh, and he hoped they would continue their journey together. And he represents this by, if you look at these two men here walking, they're walking together in lockstep. They're walking like wayfarers on a winding road. And he hoped that this would be him and Gauguin one day. That was his dream, which of course did not happen. So notice here that in his last kind of triumphant painting of the cypresses, he paints them smack in the middle of the painting, which we really haven't seen yet. We saw them to the right side, we saw them to the left side, we saw them very large, but we haven't seen them smack in the center of the painting. And they really divide the painting in half. They are so tall, again, we've noticed this before, that they extend beyond the painting. So by cropping the painting, he allows us to envision that these cypress trees are still growing. You can also see the blue mountains in the distance to the left. Of course, the cypresses and this old inn with yellow lighted windows on the right side of the cypresses. On the road, there's a yellow cart with a white horse and a harness. And of course, our two late wayfarers, because this is a nighttime painting. And this was the last painting that Van Gogh painted at St. Remy while he was there. And it was his last painting. And as I said, he felt his most triumphant painting of the cypress trees. Van Gogh described the painting as follows. This is a hint in his own words. Quote, "A night sky with a moon without radiance, the slender crescent barely emerging from the opaque shadow cast by the earth." You can see that crescent there. One star with an exaggerating brilliance. if you like, a soft brilliance of pink and green in the ultramarine sky across which some clouds are hurrying. So I think it's amazing to end with this painting, which, as I said, was the last one he did at Saint Remy. It was the one that he felt was his his best painting. And even though he's most well known, I think, for Starry Night, he was connected to this painting the most. Perhaps because it was nighttime, perhaps he put the cypress trees in the middle, or perhaps because it's him and Van Gogh, him and Gauguin, you know, on this road, his dreams for the future, his journey for the future. And I think it's an amazing painting to end with. Now, just as a footnote, Van Gogh wrote to his brother in June 1889, quote, "The cypresses still preoccupy me. I'd like to do something big with them," which I think that we've seen through this exhibit that he certainly did. And when he was buried in July 1890, after he unfortunately committed suicide, he was only 37 years old. But his grave was covered with branches of, as you can imagine, cypress trees and bouquets of large sunflowers, the two parts of nature that he was so connected to. So, you know, seeing the powerful range of works in the Met's exhibition, you see that he certainly succeeded in his ambition about how to paint cypress trees. And before we open up to questions, I just want to say that I know that the St. Louis Art Museum, which I visited on my last trip with a very, very special private tour from one of our members here, the St. Louis Art Museum has a number of Van Gogh paintings. None of the paintings are of cypress trees, but there are a number of Van Gogh paintings that you can see at the St. Louis Art Museum and have this background now about his life and the way he painted. So thank you very much. I want to make sure to leave a few minutes for questions also.
So Elana, thank you very, very much. I'm bringing up everybody's images. Maybe we should close out the slides so we can bring everybody up and see if anybody's got any questions. I've got one, but I don't want to jump ahead of anybody. Does anybody have anything they want to say, excuse me, or ask? I'm just checking. Okay, so here's my question. I mean, there's so many layers to the story. And we know that Vincent van Gogh's life was very tragic, and the timeline of his painting and how prolific he was in certain periods, it all came to I mean, my understanding is it all came to a sudden end. His brother only lived a little bit longer after he died, and then it was Vincent van Gogh's sister-in-law who actually helped the public embrace these paintings. Is that an accurate assessment of what happened?
Yes, yeah, he died. His brother died shortly after he did. Some people say of a broken heart. And his brother and sister-in-law had a baby. Van Gogh actually made some paintings as gifts for that baby. So they had a baby. His brother died, his brother Theo died, and then his sister-in-law, yes, his sister-in-law Jo was the one who took it upon herself she sent some of the paintings different places. She set up an exhibition. She was able to set up an exhibition of his paintings, and then she was able to sell some of his paintings. So during his and his brother's lifetime, as I said, he sold one painting. He lived really very much in poverty. But his sister-in-law was able to sell some of them. He became more well-known. And of course, today, he's one of the most well-known and famous artists. There's the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam that has the bulk of his paintings. But, you know, museums around the world have Van Gogh paintings because he was, even in a short time, such a prolific artist. As I said, you know, during some of those time periods, he made 200 paintings, 100 drawings. He made thousands of works of art in less than the 10 years that he was painting. So it's really it's a sad story that he wasn't recognized during his lifetime. But luckily, his sister-in-law, you know, kept all those paintings because people were saying to her, "What are you going to do with all those paintings? Get rid of them. You know, just get rid of them. What are you going to do with them?" So luckily, she saw his talent and realized she had a treasure trove, and you know, and kept them and did an exhibition of them.
Well, I also liked your comments about the fact that he didn't dilute his paint.
Yeah.
And I never thought about how he achieved that texture, that heft with the paint. And you just stated the obvious, which I never figured out that he just did, but which meant he went through the paint much faster than he would have otherwise.
Yes, yeah, and that's so interesting. And when you see the paintings, even, that's why I tried to show close-ups on this on our program. Even, close up, you see the texture, you see the ridges, you see, and you get an idea that using thick paint and letting it dry like that, you can create that. And other artists have done that. We have modern artists who do that, but Van Gogh is an early artist who do that, and you really, can see it. And I think it led such energy and emotion and to his paintings. It's just incredible.
It's very different. So I was just looking at some of the comments. Everyone said, thank you very much. Wonderful program. And it's a great way to close out the summer, because it's just, and I really appreciate those close-ups so you can see the brush strokes, the pebbles, even the dirt, grains of sand, whatever it was. It's something I never heard before. So thank you for, sharing that with us.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Is there anything else anybody wants to say? If not, we're going to say farewell. And
I do see in the I do see in the chat that someone asked, where was the last painting located? I'm sorry that I didn't mention that.
Oh yeah,
it's actually interesting. It's actually in the I don't know if I'm pronouncing it the right way, but it's in the Kröller-Müller Museum in the Netherlands, which is, Van Gogh's, where he was born in the Netherlands, and that's where that painting is. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah,
okay.
There's actually two other questions. One is about Rembrandt. Did Van Gogh see him as an influence?
Not that I know of. I know he was aware of Rembrandt, and he talked to his brother Theo. Not that I'm aware of. I know he certain Impressionist artists were influenced. Also, Japanese wood prints. A lot of Japanese wood prints were an influence. I haven't read anywhere directly that Rembrandt was an influence.
Okay, and then there's a question from Covenant Place. Actually, two questions. One, are any of these paintings in private ownership? And two, are any relatives still living today?
There are some relatives living today. I don't have the information right in front of me, but I remember a number of years ago, there was something that happened. I think it was in France, where an artist was killed.
The director.
And he was a director, and he was a relative of Van Gogh. So there are some, as I said, Van Gogh's brother, he himself never married or had children, but he had a nephew. And so there are really living relatives, although one, of course, unfortunately was killed. Yeah. And the other question was, are there any of these paintings in private? Okay, so the ones I showed you today, none of those are in private ownership. There are Van Gogh paintings that are in private ownership, but the ones that I showed you today, none of them were. But yes, there are people who do own Van Gogh paintings.
So there is one comment that says, my first stop when I went to Paris was his front door. So thank you for sharing everything with us, and reminding people of some great trips they've taken.
Yes, yes.
So, okay, just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance. And everyone's clapping. So thank you very much again.
Thank you. It's so great to be here, and hope to see everyone again soon.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.